The ripple in still water. The ripple in still water applies that there is a stillness from which no seeming action takes place, maybe no goal, no aggression, no pushing the water, but within that stillness there is a ripple. Within that stillness there is action and inspiration and life and creation that comes from the silence. That is our practice. That is what we're here to be, to do in the evolution of consciousness. I was recently driving in a car with friends and having a conversation about trains and how long it takes to get somewhere on the train versus how long it takes to drive, and thinking it would be cool to take the train, but the train takes longer, right, than it takes to drive. Now, I was an environmental studies major when I was in college, and I remember studying about the magnetic levitation train, that when we were in school, you know, the word was that we were taught this is going to be all over the country in 20 years. Well, it's 20 years later, and so I'm sitting here in this conversation thinking, how much has changed in 20 years? You know, when we look through history, when we look at eras, you can see that there are some pivotal points where there were massive changes, massive changes. You know, you went from having no light bulb to having a light bulb. You went from having no sewer system or water system in the home to having water. You went from having, of course, no computers to computers. But as I was sitting there contemplating this, I thought, you know, there's kind of a little hopeful part of me that thought when I was, you know, younger, 20 years ago, that we'd be kind of zooming around like the Jetsons. Like maybe it'd take like an hour to get to St. Louis. Maybe like if we all wanted to go to Colorado for the weekend, you could just zoom on that mid-highway rail, right? That like, you know, who knows how it would go, but I pictured kind of like the Jetsons, you know, because when you look at history, you see that there are these great leaps and bounds of how fast progress happens. Now, I thought to myself, what happened? What happened? Because there's no shortage of innovative ideas, is there? If you pick up any scientific magazine, if you talk to any people of an intelligence that is that creative intelligence that are tuning into what is possible, we know that we are not right now capitalizing on what is possible, are we? At all, in any way, shape, or form. That the height of what can be accomplished is sometimes hidden for greed, it's sometimes held onto, but it's sometimes not acted upon. Now, we can think of a lot of reasons why that may happen, but until we take it metaphysically and we look at it within ourselves of who am I here to be, how have I evolved, and what little parts inside of me have I not taken action on, have I put upon a shelf, have I let someone, somewhere, some idea, some limited space, buy it and store it up and say, hey, well, we're not going to use that now. We don't need cars now that go 80 miles per gallon, you know? Even though we have the technology, right, way back when, to be creating this. So what part of ourselves, until we look at this whole system and we realize that the internal nature is a microcosm of the external nature, we don't ask ourselves what is going on. So as I contemplated this, I thought to myself, and in this conversation, which helped, you know, spur the thought, I realized that as I was saying, I don't see too much that has changed in the last 20 years. And then I realized the big changes there has been a serious shift in, you know, technology and advancement, but that shift has come in the form of communication. The big shift is, you know, that the computers, the web used to not exist, right? And you know, my dad is a statistics professor, and he had one of the first, you know, computers that I knew of that he took a big phone, you know, those big old phones, and he stuck it on this platform, and you could hear it throughout the house. And then it dialed up to the big, massive computer that he told us, like, filled a basement, right? And then he could connect to his work from afar. But those bits of technology have actually advanced so much, right, that it used to be, and I love this, it's so weird to think of. It's not weird if you lived through it all, but for a child that didn't live through it, it has to be a totally different experience. But we lived in a time where if you're not home and someone wants to reach you, forget it, right? There were no answering machines. There was a busy signal, and probably there was a time where there was a busy signal where I just didn't do anything, who knows. But a busy signal you got, and if they didn't catch you then, you're out of luck. So if something happened, if you got stuck on the side of the road, your greatest hope was that someone else would stop, to find you, but not so that they could call in for you, because they couldn't. Obviously, they had no phone. It was so that they could bring you somewhere or go get the police to come get you, whatever it is. So there has been a major shift, but that major shift has been in technology, and I'm sure there's so many that I'm not talking about here because we all have our blind spots. But when I'm thinking about me and my everyday life and what shifted, I recognize that the big thing has shifted, that I used to have all this space where there was quiet time, where no one could reach me, where I didn't have other things to do, right? Where I could be invisible to some degree, where I could check out, right? Where I could just be. And now, coming in today, we have our emails, we have Facebook, we have everything. We have constant communication, instant communication. We have, in fact, such a speed of technology that our brains are needing to be rewired. Do you feel like your brain needs to be rewired to keep up with it? So the young people coming in today are not going to have that same transition, not going to have that same exact experience, still will need to practice dedicated mindfulness to create the space, right? But will not have that challenge of one part of their being craving this space. Wait, but slow down. And then the other part of their being say, expand me so much to the degree that I can be here, that I can get it, that I can keep communicating, that I can, whatever I am, and still be fully centered, still have space, right? That is one of the great gifts of our era, is that we are practicing the shift in consciousness at a brain level, at a cellular level, so that we can embody ourselves and become more conscious. Because if we don't rise to this challenge, what happens? If we don't rise to this challenge, we must fall asleep. If we don't rise to this challenge, we shelf aspects of ourselves and we don't bring them to light because we're encompassed and ingrained in overwhelm, depression, whatever it is, goals, seeking, all of this ladder climbing, whatever it is, you name it, what it is in your life. But we can become consumed by it, and that actually slows us down. But that's not what we're called to be slowing down. We're not in any way, shape, form called to slow down our actions, because if you look at the work of the greatest, if you look at the work even of our Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, you can see that that man accomplished so much in his lifetime, more than I could fathom writing. More writings in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary itself. More writings, more actions than one could think to accomplish, even with the day and age of technology that we have. Even if he had Google at his fingertips or the World Wide Web, even if I had that, I don't know. The only key we have to getting that there is an aspect of self that's ready and needing to slow down so that we can consciously cultivate, versus being in this space of whatever you want to call it, is our meditation and our spiritual practice. Our meditation, our spiritual practice is the one thing that will expand the mind to create the harmony and the unity in this process so that we can be born anew, show up as a new being, just like the children that are coming in, that we can be present to what is right here, right now, without pulling the cravings of the old, but recognizing the power of what was experienced in that time of silence. What was experienced in that time. Because, see, we have so many choices now, right? We have all of these things pulling on us, and the choices have become greater and greater and greater. The information and the accessibility has become greater and greater and greater. We have more. But somehow it seems that there's a trend, at least in American culture, that people are feeling less and less. The people are feeling less and less productive, connected, loved, loving. The way to presence that spiritual conundrum is to look at our practice and look at the quality of what is essential, and to bring that quality into today, in today's way. There was just an article on a major news center that talked about how our brains are, the plasticity of our brains and how it can change. And I thought, what is it going to say, right? What did it say? Meditation. Mindfulness practice and meditation. over and over and over again in the mainstream media, right? Unity, and the practice that is unity, that was founded to be a part of any spiritual practice, not just its own so-called religion, but to be the foundation of any and every spiritual practice. That unity is now becoming mainstream science. So it is ours on another level to activate it, to utilize it, and to bring it to life, and to teach it, to become teachers of it. But we can only become teachers of it when we demonstrate it. And if we're overwhelmed in a world of so much going on and so many choices, we sometimes can't hear that calling. Just this last week, I woke up one morning to an announcement that came in via text, that at Purdue University, which is the town that I grew up in, there was a shooting. And the word was on the text that we don't know, someone's out there, at least it looks like one has been shot. And you know what happens to your heart? Oh, another school, another thing, another soul in so much pain that destruction happens, another sadness. Well, for me, it triggered all of that because I was in Colorado teaching right down the street from Columbine when that happened. And then, of course, we all hear, right? Our hearts open. We all hear about this gun violence and all of this, you know, the mental issues that lead people into these states of expression that are incredibly violent and destructive. And the other thing that triggered for me is that my father and my stepmother and my little brother are all there. So my dad and my mom work there, and my little brother is in his last year of school there. And so as the texts go, we're trying to figure out if everyone's okay and where everyone was. My brother was in the building but was fine, and he's the one who let us know from the building that he was fine. But the irony is that before the news got it, before even people in West Lafayette got the news of it, it was all over Facebook. It was all over Twitter. And in fact, the news pulled it from Twitter and Facebook. So in fact, the news came from you. The news came from me. That's how the information got passed along. That is a shift in consciousness from 20 years ago. It is a shift in consciousness that people and where we are and who we are and what we are and our processing is being heard on a greater level. And that shift comes with it a great responsibility, to step out of our drama selves, out of our separate selves, out of our anger selves, our attacking selves, all of these other ego-centered selves, out of the separation of self and into the presence of the Christ consciousness that we call it in unity, which is not limited in any way, shape, or form to Christianity. The Christ consciousness is the consciousness demonstrated in Jesus, the master teacher, and demonstrated for each one of us in a field of perfection and a field of perfect blueprint imprint that exists in this realm of God consciousness for each of us to draw from and to live our true beings from, to live our true light and our true life from. That's our calling. So how do we step into that calling? In this day and age with a lot going on, we tend to try to set a lot of goals, try to perform a lot of accomplishments. But I will tell you, I believe that every great leader of our time, every great leader that we could research, that we could learn from, that we could look into, did not become what they became from a list and a series of goals, from a list of action items or a to-do list or an I should list or a why don't you list. They became what they became out of their beingness, out of their essence. And getting so clear about their unique, unrepeatable essence that is them, that was theirs, that was born within them to bring heaven onto this earth, to bring harmony and principle together onto this planet. They were so clear about that their to-do lists and their action items were made from that. They were born from that. This is the season for nonviolence. So this Thursday, the 30th of January, we kick off the season for nonviolence, which is a 64-day spiritual campaign that goes across religious boundaries or borders, across country lines, and it moves us into an invitation to take on a 64-day practice. It starts on Thursday with the memorial anniversary of Gandhi, and then it ends on April 4th, which is the memorial anniversary of Martin Luther King. Two amazing leaders, two visionaries, who were not only visionary, but who gave their entire lives, mind, body, and spirit, to birthing the presence of the holy consciousness for all of humanity. So do we think we can get there, each one of us? If there is any part of you, any part of me, any part of any of us that thinks, that's nice and all, but I'm too small, I don't have access, no one listens to me, you've got to have people listening to you, you've got to have the bank account to do it in today's day and age, you got to have this, you got to have that, you got to have that. Well, all I have to say to you, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do it, I can't do it. I did it one time, I'm not going to do it. That silly dance, do you know that thing? I need my little guys up here to do it for me. All you have to do is look at the Cup song, you know that Cup song? I got my ticket for the long way round. That song that our little Gabby has done. You look at this little dance, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably don't want to know, just ignore it. But you look at this little dance, you look at what happened when there was uprisings in Egypt. You look at how people in the United States are connecting with people in the Middle East via the cyberspace connection, sharing heart-to-heart stories, sharing love, sharing principles, sharing practice, sharing truth. You look at all of that, and if you look at it for 1 minute, then none of us can say to ourselves, I am not important, and I don't make a difference, and I can't consciously cultivate, and what I am doesn't have a place in this world, because each one of us, by right of consciousness, is born into this body and onto this planet because we have a great calling and a great charge. And if you think that you don't have an effect, just take a look at what one moment with one disturbed being, what it can create. How much pain and suffering, how much separation, how much open-hearted wailing it can create to see our brothers and sisters in such turmoil and pain that we have this experience of gun violence in schools, that we have this experience of aggression, that we have still work to do on nurturing our connection and not tolerance, but what is beyond tolerance. Absolutely beholding the Christ presence in each other and acknowledging that even if I may not understand your life or your path, even if I may choose completely different expressions, I honor that you are born of source creation, pure and perfect, and that there is a divine blueprint for you that is calling you, that is your birthright, that is your beautiful inheritance. And that is what I will see in you, for you, through you, and as you. Amen? And here's the key. If you can see it for yourself, if we can see that for ourselves, then the great Spirit that brought all of us to this moment will bring us through to a moment of expansion. That is what happened with Martin Luther King. That is what happened with Gandhi. That is what happened with Mother Teresa. That is what happened with Charles Fillmore. They were brought to another level because they stepped away from the separate ego sense of self and dedicated themselves entirely to something greater. They got in touch so clearly with what their calling was, what their purpose was, what their soul expression was, that their lists were made. The things that they needed to say no to just flittered away, and the things that were calling them to say yes were right there at their doorsteps. The doors were opening, and they walked through with courage. What are we here for? What are we about? What is our legacy? We know it said if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Sue Sicking, who is a Unity author, said this: each one of us has what appears to be two selves, our everyday outer self with personality and the one we were created to be. The self we are unfolding, bringing forth into manifestation with moment by moment living. Our purpose in life is to evolve and unfold our being to follow a perfect pattern. She goes on to say, every one of us will die to the limited personal self we think we are and become alive to a completely new being, a superman or superwoman. This is a tantalizing glimpse of what is now at hand. She says the new being that is unfolding within us will be born from the union of two principles, God and man, outer and inner self, forming one new complete being, the grand man. Our speaker last Sunday, Reverend Michael Gott, said that we don't really come alive, and I'm putting this in my own words, but that we don't really come alive until we give ourselves completely to our world, to each other, till we give ourselves completely. Have we taken the step to give ourselves to each other, to say, you are not separate from me, but I give my life to you? Now, a lot of people have done the practice of saying, I give my life to God. No? But if we are the expression of God, if we are the birthing of God, how can we give ourselves to God if we don't give ourselves to each other? That's where the line gets fuzzy, does it not? Because we can sit here and say, I give myself to the invisible, I give myself to the invisible, but maybe it's based on a selfish desire to be happy. Maybe it's based on a separate desire to have, to be a good girl so that I can get. If we're in that state of consciousness, that is not dedication to the one power and the one presence, the great principle that will activate your life, that will live it through you, for you, as you, in you, that is in fact the ripple in the water that is the fountain of creation. James Dillett Freeman, who was a Unity creative, he was our poet laureate, he was an amazing being of light. He said this: anytime we go beyond self, we come to selflessness. And another name for selflessness is God. Anytime we go beyond self, we come to selflessness. And another name for self is God. We are co-creators. It's non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable. If you're born, you're a co-creator. If you're born, you're a living, loving aspect of God that's here to express yourself and here to create for, as God, however you want to language it, however we want to see it. We can back away from that as much as we want to. We can make ourselves feel as small as we want to, but the universe is calling us to be large. So are we willing to be aware? I read that about half of us make resolutions, and after about a week, about 75% of those are left, and after about a year, about 10% of those are left in action. So what is the spiritual equivalent of a goal or a resolution? Those are the human expressions, right? Those are the human words to nurture the mind into great action, to, as much as we can, work with the world around us and be in line with our intention. But what is the spiritual equivalent? The spiritual equivalent is being conscious. It's being a conscious creator. It's giving ourselves to the world. Being conscious is about saying yes to the spiritual equivalent of a goal, of a resolution. It's about saying yes to our beingness and our essence. Each of us, no doubt, has work to do in this area. Unity is about practical spirituality, practical application, practical merging together of ancient thought and new wisdom of the Christ principles. So here are some workshop ideas for your week. Are you ready? I believe that Martin Luther King, Gandhi, I believe that our very Pope right now is clear. Clear on their essence and clear on their beingness. One stood for justice and equality, one stood for peace and nonviolence, one stood for and stands for love, action, and demonstration. That's our Pope today. The Fillmores had a covenant. They stood for prayer in everything. They stood for direct revelation in accordance with the master teacher who taught and demonstrated direct revelation. That you are not separate from your God. Get it from there. If you get it from anywhere else, you need to question it. Even from here. Do we get that? Even from here. When it resonates in you, through you, and as you, say yes. So the practical steps are to become a conscious cultivator. To become a conscious cultivator. And the first thing I need to do to become a conscious cultivator is I need to look authentically and bravely at what I'm cultivating. All of it. Can I look at my life and see what am I cultivating? If it's hard to look at ourselves, take someone else for an example. Take a mother, a father, a family member, a friend, or someone that you feel like is a powerful being. And say, what are they cultivating? Good and what you would consider bad. What are they cultivating? That's the first step, awareness, being fully aware. The second step is becoming more conscious about it, making choices. We have so many choices today. How conscious am I going to be? And can I find that thread in all of my cultivations that I call good, that I call God? And can I know that as my essence? So asking yourself, what am I about? What is my living legacy? If we have a big list and a whole set of goals, that's the human self. The divine self is about an essence. It might be a word or two, a principle. What is this life that is me about? What does it remind people? What does it bring to people? What does it bring to me? What am I about? You can think of it, a good way to think of it is to, think of your mother or your father. Think of someone that has made a huge impact on your life and think about what are they about? In everything they do, there's a thread. There's a thread that draws their life together. It doesn't matter what job they have, doesn't matter what's going on in their life. But every time you experience their essence is a demonstration, and a demonstration of what? Give yourself the gift to find out what that is for you. And say yes to it. Become more conscious of it. As we become more conscious of it, we're more able to give ourselves fully to it. And as we give ourselves more fully to it, it has its way within our world, and all of life orchestrates around supporting it, opening doors for its expression, opening doors for its multiplication, opening doors for its life. When we're clear, something happens in the third step. We go from having to say yes and no to being clear about the yeses and clear about the nos. There is certainly, in this day and age, too much to pay attention to, too much to choose from, too much to look at. Call in holy discernment. When we tether ourselves to our essence, that natural yes is there. The natural yes is there. And the natural letting go of the rest happens. But we are called into dominion to remember never to be too busy for this essence. Never to be too busy, too distracted, too separated, too depressed, to whatever it is. Never to be too consumed in the material world, in the world of humanity and action, to say yes to the great impulse of the essence, which is each of us. Amen? And here's a fourth step as a gift this week. As a gift this week, when you get in tune with what you're consciously cultivating, what your life, the thing that your life is consciously cultivating, would you give that gift to someone else? Would you think of one special person and let them know, when I look at your life, when I look at who you are as a being, who you are to me, who you are in this world, I see that this principle, this essence, this teaching, this lesson, this mastery, whatever it is, flows through everything you do, and I want you to know I see that. Imagine for a moment if anyone that ever picked up a gun had someone say that to them. Because we can't control everything that enters our hands, can we? We cannot do enough work on a physical level to manage and rule each other. But what we can do is teach the perfect liberation that comes from spiritual dominion, that comes from the center of knowing whose and who we are. And when that is given to us, when that is born in us, nothing that ever touches our hands will harm. And we will be free. Because the freedom within is exemplified in the world around us. Martha Smock, a Unity author, says, the point where human efforts leave off and the God self takes over is the turning point. It is the difference between mediocrity and genius, between bare accomplishment and outstanding achievement. Welcome to the age of genius. Namaste.